All right, guys, you're back in part two of the GLP lecture series. And we left off with the timeline, and we said, listen, here's 100 years of really hard work to get you that GLP, good laboratory practices established in a company. And I said there were a few like red flags that happened over the course of this time that we need to talk about in more detail, so that way I can really scare you up and begin to make you second guess everything that goes on in a laboratory. All right, so the first thing was the sulfanilamide disaster. So the sulfanilamide, I said in a previous video, was really an antibiotic. It was one of the first antibiotics that were really pushed out on the market, and it was great because it had served a few purposes. Strep was one of those. So you get the old-time strep throat. Well, this was an antibiotic that could help you out pretty much. So 1907 was kind of the first release of this. And then over a course of time, this was typically a solid powder. So I want you to think of a tablet form that you would have to swallow down the hatch and into your stomach. But at some point in time, they were like, you know what? Maybe little Sally up in the holler can't swallow a pill. So we're going to have to do something for little Sally so she can take this antibiotic. We need to get it out of the pill form, and we need it to get into a liquid form. So that liquid form began to happen in 1937, and S.E. Massengill Company of Tennessee created a liquid preparation. So my neck of the woods, right? So what this company decided to do would be like, hey, listen, we have this solid dose, and the solid dose is in form of a tablet. And there are certain people that just don't like tablets. Maybe they have difficulty swallowing them. They're a little bitter. Maybe we need to give this to children. They're definitely not going to swallow a tablet. So what if we can get this into a liquid preparation? So here comes the sulfanilamide elixir, and that is what this was called. That elixir was in term to something very specific. I'll address this in a minute, but that also gives rise to the idea that this was a liquid form. So I want you to think of almost like a cough syrup, right? So this drug, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the API, is mixed into a liquid format, and that liquid format is going to be given to people. That could be flavored, or it didn't need to be flavored, but still, it's liquid. So what happens is that S.E. Massengill then took this sulfanilamide and they dissolved it in diethylene glycol, which is called DEG, DEG. Diethylene glycol was a great solvent. It took just a little bit of this to put in solution. Sulfanilamide went extremely well in this particular solvent. Otherwise, they wouldn't have used it, right? I mean, it had to do something for them to pick this out of everything, but diethylene glycol was used to make this prescription drug in a way that they would push out to people, so that way this antibiotic could have more available formats other than a solid dose. So 600 gallons of this stuff was made, and then the FDA at this particular time did not require safety testing or animal testing. They were just like, whatever. Just keep giving us your tax dollars and we'll keep burning through it. Thank you for going to work really, really hard and sending us all of those thousands of dollars that you come out of your paycheck every year, and we'll keep taking more. But you know what? We're not going to require safety testing. I mean, yeah, makes perfect sense, right? So after the sulfanilamide elixir went out and people started to take it and people started to pour it into their spoons and swallow it down, people began to die. Oh no. What happened? FDA? Why didn't you step up? Right? I mean, it was your job to make sure that products are safe and effective. No, it wasn't. Not at this time. I mean, 1907 to 1937, no, it was not. This was not the FDA's role. The FDA put that on the priority of the company. They just believed that the company would make a safe product to sell to consumers. I mean, there was no reporting back in the time to make sure these things were safe and effective, right? I mean, that's kind of odd. I mean, look at this. If I go back to this timeline, okay, 1906, Pure Food and Drug Act, 1907, sulfanilamide, first antibiotic. Yay! 1930 scandal. Sulfanilamide. 1938, the manufacturer. Ding, 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 ding. Manufacturer. The manufacturer has to prove the effectiveness of a drug. So here we get something that was produced mass market, pushed out 600 gallons of it. People began to swallow it. People began to die from it. All right, well, what was going on? Oh, the FDA had to figure it out. So there was a woman, an FDA chemist, Frances Kelsey. Here we go. Good, Frances Kelly. Good for you. Good for you. You did your job. And Frances Kelly looked at sulfanilamide elixir. And Frances said, oh, diethylene glycol. Diethylene glycol, the solvent that you use to dissolve all this stuff in, and you send it out to a consumer, that diethylene glycol began to affect people's kidneys and making such large kidney stones that their kidneys just completely shut down. And they ended up dying because of it. Folks, ethylene glycol is antifreeze. That is what this stuff is. This company was taking an active pharmaceutical ingredient, which was safe because they had used it for 30 years. It was safe. And they put it in a liquid form, and that liquid form included antifreeze. And they pushed it out to consumers who bought it, swallowed it, used it, and ended up dying because of it. But Frances Kelsey was one of the first to actually kind of figure this out. All right. Well, 1 year later, after this happened, 1 year later, what you're going to find out is that the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act was implemented. So no longer is it just food and drug. We're now lumping cosmetic into that as well. And there's going to be more regulations in place concerning all of these areas. The food that has been looked at a little bit up until now, the drug, which has been looked at a little bit up to now, and now newly cosmetics that they are going to be in charge of as well. So more regulations in place, stricter regulations in place. More details are going to have to be gathered by the companies and by the industries that make these products, but one step in the right direction. During this change, during the update, a couple of things happened. One, required medicinal products to be licensed by the FDA. Folks, you just can't open up shop and make whatever you want to and then sell it. That's not the way this is going to work. You're going to open up shop. You're going to get approval. And that approval has to be from the FDA. And the FDA is going to come to your location to make sure it's not in your garage. They're going to look inside of your location to make sure you're not using rusty equipment or things that don't work and you're just hodgepodging things together in a laboratory environment. And then they'll give you the approval stamp. They'll give you the okay. It also required, and I hate to say this, but it's also going to require products to be non-toxic. Are you kidding? You have to tell companies that you want to have them to make products that are not toxic. And now for a change, you're going to have to do toxicity studies, maybe, and report those to the FDA to be like, hey, yeah, they're not toxic. They're not going to kill anybody. So the company that was making the sulfanilamide elixir, let's talk about them for a minute. The FDA could not shut them down, folks. The FDA could not do anything about that product. This was before the FD&C Act began to take place or began to get implemented. Can you believe that? So once the sulfanilamide elixir went out to people, once they started to swallow it, once they started to die, the FDA couldn't say anything to Essie Massengill about recalling it or doing anything at all. However, they found a backdoor approach. It's tricky and it's sad, but they found a backdoor approach. The company was eventually fined massive amount of money. One of the chemists that actually was involved in this process actually committed suicide because they knew what was coming down. The other chemists were taken to the courtroom and prosecuted because of what they did. But the only way that the FDA could pull this product off the market and prevent the sale is because they termed it an elixir on the label. Sulfanilamide elixir. And due to labeling laws that were in place at that particular time, elixir meant alcohol. And they found out that no alcohol was used in the manufacturing of that product. So, because of a mislabel, they were able to pull that product off the shelves. But if it wasn't for that, they probably would have had a very difficult time getting that product off of market as quickly as they did. It was due to a mislabel error. Simple as that. Elixir meant alcohol, and there was no alcohol in the recipe at all. Okay, a lot of drama here. Oh, a lot of drama. We got a company, made a product for many, many years. Perfectly safe. No one questioned it. They knew it worked. They made a change in the manufacturing. They used the solvent to get it into a liquid form. No laboratory tested the solvent to make sure that it was safe and that it wasn't going to kill anybody. That solvent, diethylene glycol, aka antifreeze, made a product. They sold the product. People took the product and they died because of the product. And only because they termed it elixir and yet did not use any alcohol in the manufacturing of that product were they able to pull that product off of the shelves as fast as they did. Whew. Do people have any of their crap together? I mean, what is this, right? This is the United States. I mean, this is like something that would happen in like a weird, nasty, filthy country that really don't care about you at all. Huh. That's not the only story. Let's look at another one. This one was very similar. This one, though, is called sulfa. I think my microphone went out. Okay, let me kind of rewind. All right, so after the sulfanilamide disaster, we get another sister drug, and this sister drug is called sulfathiazole. Sulfathiazole, though, was very similar to sulfanilamide. They are very common or share common characteristics with each other, but they're just slightly different. So another company actually took control of the sulfathiazole arena, and that company was called Winthrop Chemical Company out of New York. So this was another drug that was given to people, and this time this drug worked wonders with pneumonia. So again, something that was prescribed, something that was given, whatever the case was. In the beginning, worked out great, absolutely. And then as that drug was getting prescribed, as that drug was getting used by consumers, we get this weird little thing that begins to happen. On the manufacturing side of the house, what happened is that phenobarbital got mixed in with the sulfathiazole, this new sister drug. Phenobarbital is a sedative. It puts you to sleep. I mean, if you're wired up like I am most of the time, then I could take some phenobarbital and plonk, and then away I go. Not. Bedtime. Bedtime is here. But phenobarbital was not supposed to be part of this manufacturing recipe. And when this particular drug, batch of drug, was given out to consumers, over 300 people either died or got sick from that prescription, from taking this drug. Now, it says 300 died or sick. 82 people of that 300 died. The rest of them got really sick, really ill, maybe had to go to the hospital, but ended up not dying, just, maybe for some of them on the brink. Notice what their findings were down here at the very bottom. Number 1, the contamination was attributed to an error during the tableting process. In other words, you have one job, and you could not do your one job. And this meant that something got switched. That's what this really meant. They were blending, they were mixing, someone added the wrong bag of stuff into the batch. And then it pressed them into tablets, and then the tablets popped out, and the tablets got packaged, and away they went. Yay! No laboratory testing. Nothing was done to make sure that it is what it was. GLPs, where were you at? What's going on? You're not going to do laboratory testing on finished products? I mean, the laboratory testing needs to help ensure that the manufacturing side's doing their job the right way. Manufacturing, you had certain rules and policies in place. Why didn't you do it? Laboratory side, why didn't you catch their mistakes? You're all working together? Why aren't you double checking each other? Look what they found. Number 2, verbatim, quote, one lot contained 0 milligrams of sulfathiazole and 350 milligrams of phenobarbital. Are you kidding me? You made a drug. You marketed that drug as that drug. But yet that drug was not in the tablets. Something totally different was in the tablets. And you sent these off to people who were already sick because they probably had pneumonia and they had a bad case of it in order to go to a hospital or to a doctor in the first place. And then you turn around and give them a product, and they take that product, and the active ingredient that made that product work against pneumonia wasn't even there. It was something totally different, phenobarbital, and it was so much of that sedative that it was knocking people out who were already sick and they just couldn't recover from it. Or they weren't that sick, but they took a high dose of a sedative and clunked them out for days, maybe. Right? What on earth is happening? We get issues. So yet again, we have a problem in place. This was after the sulfanilamide problem, and we get another issue. We need to put a stop to this. These types of things need to stop happening. Why do they keep happening? Do you want to take one of these drugs? Up until this point, you probably have never questioned a tablet in your life. You always assume that what is there is what's supposed to be there. Somebody did their job the right way. They're not going to put a fake, phony tablet in my bottle. Okay, go figure. That's what these people thought too. Next up, we get thalidomide. Oh, gosh. If you've taken the CTC 110, the chemical safety class, you've already went across thalidomide before. Thalidomide, notoriously known as an example case of what not to do as far as laboratory testing and manufacturing goes. So we have ventured into the 1950s, and in the 1950s, this drug thalidomide was prescribed and sold typically overseas, not in the United States, but typically overseas, especially in areas like Europe. And it was given for morning sickness. So if you were pregnant, you're probably getting sick in the morning, and you were throwing up, you're just nauseous, vomiting, who knows, right? But we've got a drug for you. Come and take thalidomide. Sign up today. We'll give you a bottle. The issue is that these pregnant women were taking a drug. This drug was definitely not tested to the extent that it needed to be tested. And the drug was doing a couple of things. Number one, it was only causing babies' deaths while they're in the womb. That's all. I mean, come on. Just a clump of cells, right? Well, we have an issue. We have a baby that is growing, and these people are taking thalidomide, which is helping with their morning sickness, and thalidomide is actually causing the baby to die while it's in the womb. This was almost like a medicated abortion in a way, right? Next up, if it didn't kill your baby, it would just mutate them. Think of Simpsons and the nuclear factory. That's what we're going to get ready to happen here. This drug actually was targeting growing babies, the fetus. The arms, the legs, mutated. Not growing the right way. And as these babies are getting born, many, many months later, as these babies are being born, they start to see these deformities. Deformities in the feet, no toes. Deformities in the legs, maybe they stop at where your knee stops. Deformities in the arms, again, no fingers. Or fingers that are webbed. Maybe not 5 fingers. Maybe 3 and a nub. Or the arms just stop at the elbow where your elbow stops. Maybe that's where all that they get. All due to thalidomide. 10,000 babies born with defects because of a drug. Well, guess what? Good old Francis Kelsey. Good old Francis Kelsey discovered the association of the birth control drug thalidomide and was able to backtrack and be like, listen, it is thalidomide that is causing this. The scary part about it is that as Frances begins to take a look at this drug, because she's the one that put a stop to it, really, a manufacturing company in the USA, unsuccessfully, I might add, tried to get this drug approved 6 times. 6 separate times. So that way they could manufacture this drug and sell it to people in the United States. And Francis says, oh, wait a minute. You're not going to get the FDA approval unless this drug turns out to be safe and effective. So Francis Kelly put a stop to it. This drug was never really released into the United States, at least on a large scale. It was in the testing scale, not getting sold to consumers, but in the testing venture of it. And yes, there were babies that were born in the United States that were thalidomide babies because they were part of that test group, but not many of them at all. Unlike 10,000 born overseas. The reason is that thalidomide was something called chiral. And this was not new to organic chemists, but up until this point, these chiral compounds were not tested separately. So I want you to think of these chiral compounds as compounds that have a left and a right hand. They are oriented differently in 3D space. Now, with that said, they have the same numbers of everythings, folks. And I mean everythings. They have the same chemical formula. They have the same molecular weight, the same number of carbons, the same number of hydrogens. Everything adds up. They are connected the same. The connections are even the same, right? The difference, though, is how they orient themselves in a 3D geometry. So again, think of your hands, your left hand and your right hand. You have the same number of fingers. You have the back of your hand. You have the palm of your hand. At first glance, all of the components that make your hand a hand are there. But they are somewhat oriented in a different way in 3-dimensional space. They're mirror images of each other. That's what was happening with thalidomide. And thalidomide had a left-handed form and a right-handed form. And now we're going to get a new regulation that gets put into place. And all of these chiral compounds, they have to be tested independently of each other. Or if you know that this drug is going to work and that drug has this 3D shape, you're going to have to make sure that only that one 3D shape is getting manufactured, is getting added in, and is getting tested. Any of the other possibilities that are out there, you're going to have to make sure that those are tested and that they're safe if you want to use them, or you're going to have to clean up your product, which can be very time consuming and very expensive to only get that one version, in this case of thalidomide, that was safe. Because one version of thalidomide was safe. The other version of thalidomide that was oriented in a different way, in a different 3D geometry, that version was the defect. So now all of a sudden, we're going to have to do testing on all of it. Not just the drug with the same chemical formula and the same compound and call it a day. A little bit more about chiral carbons. It is a carbon with 4 different attachments. So what that means is that if I have a carbon in a structure, and let's say blah, 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 that can be anything that it wants to be. Let's say another carbon is out here, right? And then let's say that this is an OH group, and that is a H group, and this is a chlorine. I don't know. I just made them all up, right? That is a chiral carbon. The chiral carbon is right here in the center because this has 4 different groups attached to it. An oxygen is attached, a hydrogen is attached, a chlorine is attached, and a carbon is attached. 4 different things. That is a chiral carbon. This is very common, folks. Most pharmaceutical drugs have chiral carbons, at least one in their structure, because these are big structures. They're not simple little things. These are often very big structures that have many possibilities or opportunities for a chiral carbon to come into existence. And that means that we're going to have to make sure that we test all of those chiral possibilities because of that. So due to the thalidomide problem, the thalidomide is going to put into place in 1962 an amendment to the FD&C Act. Now, keep in mind, FD&C was already in place, but this is going to be a slight amendment, an update. That's kind of how I want you to think of this. And the FDA now is going to put stricter criteria and more involvement in what they call clinical trials. The FDA is going to require full clinical trials of new medications. That means you're going to have to invest a lot more time. You're going to have to invest tons of more money. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars now, right? Billions of dollars, possibly, of money and time. And time means typically 5 to 10 years, if we're lucky, in order to generate this laboratory data to be submitted to the FDA. Kelsey eventually ended up getting the Presidential Award from John F. Kennedy based on the work that she did with the FDA. She worked at the FDA till she was 90 years old. So apparently she was doing something good, right? And then after she retired, she left, and she continued to live another 11 years. She passed away at 101 years old, and she passed away in 2015, not too long ago, folks. So, due to Francis, the thalidomide case was stopped, and the elixir mislabeling was pulled and recalled from the market off the consumer shelf, so that way more people could not die from these products that were absolutely awful. All right, so that's where this video is going to stop. In the next video, we're going to continue on. We're going to talk about more problems over this timeline that we're going to see throughout the United States. And these are just little tidbits, folks. There's so many stories like this. These are just little nuggets of ones that have been used, because this is what really corresponded to certain changes within the FDA, the GMPs, and the GLP side of the house. So in the next video, we'll pick up with our next one, and that's going to concern good old-fashioned over-the-counter Tylenol.